Well, I think that David, would you like to do your reading?
Yes, I certainly would. And thank you, Marty. And today I'm going to tell you a little bit about what happens when a massive old star uses up all of its fuel and becomes a supernova. And the music is done to a song, and the words were written by a good friend of mine, Peter Jadicke, and it goes like this. The stars go nova one by one, kaboom, kaboom. Nucleosynthesis is done, kaboom, kaboom. The supernova dissipates what fusion energy helped create, and the stars go nova in the galaxy. In the galaxy, the heavy elements are born, kaboom, kaboom, and from the stellar cores are torn, kaboom, kaboom. Shells of gas are strewn through space, distributing matter all over the place, and the spiral arms are littered with debris, littered with debris. As years went by, the remnants spread, kaboom, kaboom. But the universe is far from dead, kaboom, kaboom. To eliminate the tedium, the interstellar medium forms the molecules that make up you and me. Thank you.
Boom.
Very good. Very good. It's very appropriate. Very appropriate. That is a natural life cycle, and that David mentioned. One of the reasons I studied astronomy was to investigate what I'm looking at when I look through the telescope. I want to know more about why is that star red, why is it blue, and so forth. And as opposed to just finding it. And so, but there are many examples of that in life, and many examples of that in Torah. And that, I think, is very appropriate, David.
Thank you, Martin. Thank you.
Thank
Martin.
you. Thank you.
Really appreciate that, hearing that. I was actually worried that when I started to sing that you'd all go screaming into the night, but thanks, Marty.
You're welcome. So anyway, let me read the prayer that we start our Torah study with. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen. Well, first, are there any questions about what we've been discussing before? Okay, well, we are, we stopped with the, on Genesis 48:8. So we're ready to begin on verse Genesis 48:9.
I thought we were on 12.
Well, we passed that.
Yeah, I thought we were. I have a little pencil mark at 12. Because I think we did. I never expected to see you again, and here God has let me see.
Okay. We had focused. I thought most of our focus was on verse 8 before, but but I think it would be worthwhile to start with 9. Just start reading with verse 9 to get us into the rest of the thought process here, rather than coming in halfway in the thought process. Okay, so if somebody
You want me to do it?
okay, it was almost a tie, but Ricky won by a nose, David. Just a split second.
So I wonder,
You start, Ricky, and then we'll
Okay.
pick up with David.
And Joseph
Okay,
said to his father, "They are my sons whom God has given me. Bring them to me," he said, "that I may bless them." Now Israel's eyes were dim with age. He could not see. So Joseph brought them close to him, and he kissed them and embraced them. And Israel said to Joseph, I never expected to see you again, and here God has let me see your children as well.
Okay, let's stop at this point, and go back to some of the discussions we have had. One of the things to think about is the word see.
We did this last week.
A little bit.
Okay.
But I just want to set the stage because we need to remember this. What do you recall, Ricky, from last week?
The not being, is he totally blind? Does he have cataracts or glaucoma, or is it just old age? Is it just So we sort of went around on all. I think we sort of covered the diseases of the eye, and
Sure.
but then also see, there's this. I don't even remember if we brought it up last week, but I'm saying sometimes I see things not visually with my eyes.
Exactly.
The
Up here.
other, I see,
That's right.
right. I sense it. I know it. I see the truth. I see the light.
In the shower.
Okay. Any other comments about this? Would you, okay, then why don't you then begin with 12?
Okay. Joseph then removed them from his knees, and he bowed low with his face to the ground. Joseph took two of them, Ephraim with his right hand to Israel's left, and Manasseh with his left hand to Israel's right, and brought them close to him. But Israel stretched out his right hand and laid it on Ephraim's head, so he was the younger, and his left hand on Manasseh's head, thus crossing his arms, although Manasseh was the firstborn. And then he blessed Joseph, saying, and I'm sure you want me to stop there with my arms crossed.
Okay. Right. So any
again,
comments about this?
Well, once again, it's the firstborn ain't getting the name, the title, the goodies, the whatever. There's no, what was it? That's not parthenogenesis. What is the term for? I've lost the word for when the firstborn male gets everything.
The birthright, progenitor.
Progenitor.
Yeah, there's a word in legal terms, at least through Middle Ages, why the
Heir?
Huh? Well, no, heir is anybody. No, but I'll think of it, halfway through the lecture today. But we've got a case of the second, not the firstborn getting the blessing that the firstborn should get. And that goes back a couple of generations worth of that kind of nonsense.
Okay.
Esau and, all of that. Right. Even Reuben gets kicked out, so to speak.
Okay. Any other comment here? Okay. I have several. Rabbi, you had your hand up. Rabbi Murray, I think you had your hand up too. No. Okay. So the rabbi and then Joanne.
Okay, so two things. One is that I love to point out that the Midrash steps in here, really acknowledging not just Jacob's, whether you want to call it a mistake or whether you want to call it an intentional crossing of the hands, but the fact that the boys don't argue about it. The boys accept it. That becomes the major lesson. And halavai, that should always be the case in Jewish history or human history, that siblings should all get along like that and just accept what it is that's the blessing of parents or grandparents without arguing or fighting, and the sibling rivalry, whatever you want to call it. That's one. Two is, again, the English doesn't reflect this, but there's a lovely play on words in the Hebrew phrase that Jacob or Israel crosses his hands. Okay, and it's the same word. If you change the vowels, it's the same word, not only to cross the hands, but also some of you may remember the Hebrew Yiddish word seichel, okay, which is a kind of common sense, good, wisdom, good common sense understanding is seichel, and who sikelet yadav, that he mixed up his hands, but that this was done wisely. Is whatever. And again, the English doesn't necessarily reflect it, but it's an interesting play on words in the Hebrew.
Very good. I found one other bit of, well, first, Joanne.
Between the two of you, I hate to talk, but
No.
I would think that when Joseph was bringing his children, there would be like their first name, and then it would be added, something will be added like my firstborn son, or you would know that this is the oldest as he said it in some way. At least that's kind of seems to me to be tradition in a lot of countries where you say, give their name. And they don't give that in my English translation. I don't know if they do in Hebrew, but it just seems to me like he would know exactly who was oldest and who was youngest by in India, I'm known as Joanne Auntie. They know immediately who I am because of that auntie on the end. So that's my contribution right now.
Okay. Yes, Don.
As usual, between Saturdays, I go diving into as much as I can learn. But mentioned only in passing, and what we saw last time, that Jacob has admitted the two boys into the Hebrew line, but the mother, Asenath, is only mentioned in passing. And it turns out that she is high royalty from the Egyptian side. And in fact, those two boys, Ephraim and Manasseh, have half their genes from a long line of pharaohs. And that's totally ignored in the text. It's as if it's not important at all. And then from there on, it's totally ignored. And I just thought that was a bit of hubris on Jacob's part. Like he's a guest of the pharaohs. Without the pharaohs and Joseph, who is the vizier for Pharaoh, Jacob would be up the creek without a paddle, along with his other sons. So, and then this fact is kind of this lost after that point throughout the rest of the Torah. So anyway, I'm just reporting what I'm learning here, and I'm just wondering if anybody had any comment on it.
Well, it is an interesting, a very interesting thing that you bring up. I am not aware of any literature that addresses that. So I just do not know how to answer that. It is strange that a mother would go along with something like that. But although it doesn't really say if the son, I don't think Manasseh and Ephraim are going to be, although Jacob is inheriting them, I don't believe it's even addressed as to where the sons reside after this. I don't know if the sons go back home. I think it's and live with mama and papa, or if they remain in Jacob's possession. I just do not know. The story doesn't say anything. We're not going to read anything about that. And I don't know of any midrash that relates to that. But it doesn't really matter if they are the ones that, it doesn't matter where they're going to live, they are going to receive the inheritance. And I think it's the inheritance that is the focus of the passage that we're reading, as opposed to where the kids are going to be living. So I don't know, I can't specifically answer your question other than say that it's not mentioned. I agree with you. Does anyone else? Yes, Rabbi.
Well, I think we would infer that through this process of blessing and adoption, if you will,
Mhm.
that Ephraim and Manasseh are coming into the Israelite community. And because Jacob specifically says, and any other children will be considered
Correct.
Egyptians. So the inference is there, but again, I would agree. I can't think of any explicit reference that talks about where they go.
Right. So, anyone else on this? Yes, Michael. Michael, you're muted.
Is that better?
Much.
Yeah. If I could just speak in a very general sense, in an extremely general position that I would take, is that the stories of the Torah in general, not everything is explained because it has, because of the flow of the story, whatever it may be. It's just the continuity of telling that story, and sometimes you may focus on something that doesn't necessarily have any particular meaning other than the flow of the story.
Okay. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
That's exactly the point in which the Midrash is born, when there is a hole there that we don't know what happened. So Michael, you can sit there and invent something that tells you where these kids are going. That's exactly what the Midrash, and your question is a very rabbinical one, and that's the answer, is creating that story.
Very good. Thank you. Any other comments? Well, should we move on?
Sure.
Okay.
All right. Any blessings? Oops. Okay. Any blessings saying who's somebody else? Or am I echoing?
Okay, you're echoing for some reason. I don't know if it's me. I had to turn up my volume. Let me lower it a little bit. Does that
Okay.
help?
Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2,
Good.
1.
It was me. I had, when Joanne was speaking, I had to turn up my volume to maximum.
Okay. And he blessed Joseph, saying, the God in whose ways his fathers, Abraham and Isaac, walked, the God who has been my shepherd from my birth to this day, the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, bless the lads. And in them may my name be recalled, and the names of my fathers, Abraham and Isaac, and may they be teeming multitudes upon the earth. You didn't tell me to stop there.
Okay.
I expected you to tell me to stop.
Let's stop here
Yeah.
and let's go back a little bit. Any comments about this? Any comments about what he's doing at this point?
Well, he's bringing the whole genealogy into
It's
into
not me, it's someone else that there's
somebody else
extra.
definitely. I think it's Marcia. Marcia, the little lights going on your screen sometimes. Okay, it's gone.
Okay. All right, so whoever was, go ahead.
Marcia, okay, there's something that's coming because
I
the
don't know. I don't see any lights coming on here. on my
no around your
computer.
picture sometimes, but that's all right.
Not in
I'm
Halo.
saying it brings up the whole genealogy, the family starting back as far as Abraham, and sort of bringing to mind again the promise made that there may be teeming multitudes upon the earth that come out of this family line. That's very obvious.
Okay,
Very obvious there. I don't see anything else.
any other comments? Yes, Don.
Another question. I'm sure we're going to find this out pretty soon, but what exactly is the legacy for the two boys? Because
Good point.
Jacob he's got nothing left, really. He's living in a foreign land. Pharaoh took the land, everybody's land, in exchange for food. And so is there anything left of value or hard value?
Well, what is on your mind? What is on your mind, Don?
Just a question, Marty.
Okay,
I'm just wondering what exactly is being conferred here.
it's very important. Rabbi Mary.
Well, as we spoke about it before, there is no beginning and end, and wherever we talk about Torah. So what we're talking here, Don, is the fact that each one of the tribes, that's the names, each one is the name of the son of Jacob. So now we have an addition of 2 more names, and they will get what it says, they'll get the name of Yaakov, of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. So they get like a new name belonging to the entire tribe. And we know that in the future, the legacy that Yaakov leaves them is about what's going to happen in Canaan when they get to what we call Eretz Israel. And it's a nice story there about Menashe and Ephraim. I'm not going to bring it up, but that's what Yaakov has. Yaakov doesn't have now a piece of land. They're in Egypt in the area. This is about the future when they are already in the promised land. And at that point, Ephraim and Menashe, since they are now like the other sons, like a part of everyone, they're going to get land over there.
Okay, I know we've moved ahead for that explanation, but at this point, yes, Don.
Yeah, and I don't want to get too far ahead here because, as I said, I go running off on tangents during the week. But I understand that, Rabbi Mary. Thank you. But I think it's like about 300 years between Joseph and Moses, and so now we have
400 plus.
400 plus. Okay. So now we have to, and that's between Ephraim and Manasseh and Moses, and then Moses has to. So the Hebrews have to submit to slavery and go through all of that, and then through the Exodus to get to Canaan. And maybe I should stop here because I tend to go crashing off through the woods. But I'm really interested in what legacy. My original question, which was answered by Rabbi Mary. Thank you.
Okay,
Well, I'll tell you, and I spoke to the group in the past, ignore numbers because the numbers are not going to tell you much. It's about a story, not history. It's about the story. And the story tells us that after Joseph, the Pharaoh doesn't recognize them, etc., etc. So it does, well, now Miri is talking, okay? It does not really matter. Or you can say this is a prophecy that Yaakov knows. But you can see it, you know, in a very simple way, or simpler. This is Miri talking, is that after this is what happened, never mind how many years. The point is that they were many, and we say it in the Haggadah, they came 70 people, and then there were enormous numbers. But the story is this blessing, and then the slavery, and then the redemption, and then the Sinai, and eventually going to Canaan. So, this is how I take it. This is my story. This is my mythology. This is what tells me how things happen, regardless of the numbers that we have here to follow. But
Okay,
that's me, Don.
thank you very much. Just 1 second, Ricky. Suzanne had her hand up before.
I'm wondering who the angel is that Jacob's referring to. I mean, for me as a Christian, I look at it as Messiah, but I mean, not everyone's going to look at it the way I do.
Well, there is a comment in my book about that, but I'm going to let your question go up for grabs right now to see who would like to respond to that. Yes, Rabbi.
Well, I'll start with the responses. I mean,
Okay.
the obvious one is that the angel or the man with whom Jacob wrestled,
Right.
who winds up blessing him and giving him the name of Israel and talks about all what the legacy will ultimately be. Now, so that would be the obvious
Right.
redeemer, although that's kind of a new term putting in here. But on the other hand, Jacob now, after all those years in between, might have a new understanding of what that encounter actually was. And so it's comfortable for him, or telling for him, to use a different term of the man, stranger, angel with whom he wrestled.
Ricky, you had your hand up.
I was going to say, in the third line in verse 16 sort of tells me that this is a prophecy, because it says, in them may my name be recalled. So it's looking forward. In them, in the future, my name will be recalled from the past. So that's the line that tells me, may my name be recalled and the names of my fathers and Isaac's. But it's a future-looking sentence.
Mm-hmm.
It also, the commentary that I have in Plout is that it may mean God.
Mm-hmm.
Angel may mean God, not just. So we've discussed this before in the discussion about the encounter that Jacob has had with the angel, and the rabbi reminded us of that.
Marty,
yes,
Marty, for those who are interested in following along your line of thinking and Gunther Plaut's line of thinking, the source would be Franz Rosenzweig's book, The Star of Redemption.
Thank you very much. That's very important.
That would be that for those who want to follow through theologically with that, go to Rosenzweig.
Yeah. So it depends. There are many different interpretations. We did discuss a number of these different interpretations before, but any other comment before I go on? Yeah. Okay. First Rabbi, and then Joanne.
Yeah, I mean, it probably is known to many of you that the way that Jewish tradition has interpreted that phrase of through them may my name be recalled, is that this is the blessing, that almost this formula is the blessing that that fathers or parents use to bless their sons. Okay, may you be like Ephraim and Manasseh. Right. So this becomes the source text or the proof text, if you will, for why that's the blessing that's given to sons.
Very good. Yes, Joanne.
Here it seems like he is saying the angel is doing this through him. And that's a little different. Usually, you might say, I dreamed this, or I thought about this, or in my prayers, this was my vision, but he isn't saying that. He's saying the angel who has redeemed me from all harm, bless the lads. It's like he's saying that angel is blessing the lads. And that's a much different meaning than just genealogy.
Well, it's God and the blessing, because it's the God, blah, 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 the God who, blah, blah, the angel who, blah, blah, bless the Lord, the lads. So there's God's mentioned twice and then the angel. So if you read the 2 lines before that, Joanne.
Oh, okay. I was into the angel.
Yeah, you're into the angel.
Joanne, if you recall, then the other encounter of Yaakov, Israel, with angels is when they go up and down the ladder.
Yes.
And remember? So at that point, we know that there are messengers of God, because malach means messenger.
Right.
And in that scene, a lot of malachim come up and down. So I think that Yaakov has a couple of encounters with malach. And Marcia, did you want to say something?
Yes.
No, I wanted to go back a minute, not what you were talking about, but what Rabbi Norm was talking about. Is that what my daughter says when she blesses her son using those 2 names? I've heard them all my life, but I was saying, so that's where it is here that she's doing that now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it comes in next verse.
Now, I'm going to take us. I'm just going to
Marty,
build. Yes.
Marty, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Can I just
Sure.
affirm what Rabbi Miri was saying? Because the malach, the servant angel, whatever, and it specifically says at Bethel, which was the encounter where God is in this place, I did not know it, as opposed to the wrestling that I was talking about, which was at the river Yabok. It's not at Bethel. So she's probably more correct.
Okay, thank you.
It's right there.
Now, let's go one step further. When we bless our sons, and I know in Reform, we have prayer to also bless our daughters in Reformed Judaism.
No, that's not just
Is
Reform. That's traditional.
It's traditional,
right? Just different. It's a different blessing. There's a different blessing for the sons, different blessing for the daughters, and then one for the entire family.
Okay, I thank you for correcting me, because that's important. But where does this blessing come from? Is it just from parent to children? Or when we invoke this blessing, is there a much higher order to it?
Grandparents, the Zayde.
Because you're also saying, when you bless your children, we often don't say it, but it is come from the grandparent, through the grandparents, through the great-grandparents, and so on back in time. all the way through Jacob, Isaac, Abraham, and God. It's not just us doing it. It is far more important. And therefore, because it's saying what God has said in God's prophecy to Abraham, and it's been repeated time and again in Isaac and Jacob already. Okay, this is a different portion of the blessing. It's not material. It's a spiritual blessing. It doesn't mean that because all the other sons are going to they're going to divvy all kinds of things up, the material part. But I think that this is a very important passage for that reason, for the way it says it goes, that this is, may you be like Manasseh and Ephraim, or Ephraim and Manasseh, whatever you want to do, I don't care, because it switches both ways, as we'll read in Torah again. Okay, but the point I want to make is that it's so important to know it from the origins of this blessing and what's going on here. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
I want to ask the question maybe to Rabbi. When Yaakov speak about why is he crossing his hand and so forth, so he said that the young one and his seed is going to be Melo Hagoim, which was full of nations, I suppose, full of otherwise either foreigners or nations. So is the last word there. Yeah, fill the nations.
I remember a comment from somewhere that fill the name was more interpreted like as shall be an inspiration, for the or a fulfillment. It's not shalem, it's malol. So it's but I don't remember the source of it, but I do remember seeing it somewhere that malol goyim.
You know what? If we put the punctuation a little different, and we put a punctuation between melo, mem, lo, hagoim, it won't have too many.
Well, it could, that would be that's a good one. That almost like he would be, different from all the other nations. Yeah, that's a nice perush.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you.
Chizki.
Very good. Any other statements of questions? Yes, Joanne.
I really like the tradition of blessing both the boy and, each child, male or female. When my children were blessed at baptism, or no, excuse me, they were blessed when they were born by the priest. He blessed me and he blessed the child. He did not bless my husband, nor did he bless any of the family there. And this occurred 3 times and different priests. Now, I don't know whether that's throughout the whole church or not, but I was really frustrated that he hadn't blessed my husband. Thank you.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I do not know the answer to that.
I don't either. I guess at the time I thought I might research it, but I really didn't have Wikipedia then.
Yes, Don.
I thought I'd let Joseph's marriage behind. It keeps popping up. Is there any other? This point in Jewish history where two lines of parentage are joined at Ephraim and Manasseh. Is there any other place in the Torah where there's an offspring resulting from the Hebrew line and some outside line? Because in terms of blessings, we always know who the mother is, but the fact is it's never really certain who the father is. And so Jacob's blessing kind of makes that decision, okay, so Joseph must be the father because I'm blessing the boy, so Joseph must be the dad. But is there any other place where that combination occurs?
Well, quite a few of Jacob's sons are born to non-Israelite women, to the concubines of Leah and Rachel, and they're given full recognition as sons of Israel.
Okay,
if that's what you're leading towards, huh?
Yeah, so that really was so it's really like the determination of who does the blessing in each case, it seems.
Yeah, I mean, there's no indication that Ephraim and Manasseh become favorites as grandchildren compared to his own progeny. I'm not aware of anything that would lead to that understanding.
Okay.
Well, by that, Joseph continues to be the preferred one. And we mentioned last time that he gets 2 portions versus the rest of the brothers.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. I really left it behind now.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, Suzanne.
I just wanted to add that Rahab and Ruth were not Jewish. Ruth was a Moabite, which really was looked down upon. And I'm not sure about Rahab. I don't think she was a Moabite, but regardless, neither one of them were part of Israel's tribes, and yet they were prominent in the line of David, King David.
You have the same with Esther.
Right. Although in Ruth's case, the Jewish tradition understands her as converting,
right,
joining the Jewish people before she has a child.
Well, that's true. I mean, yes.
Okay. Any other comments? Well, let's move. Well, something just crossed my mind, and it may be a reasonable place to discuss this. Going all the way back to Adam and Eve, early on in the book. Abel's bumped off. Cain receives the mark of Cain, and Adam and Eve have Seth. Is the mark of Cain a blessing or a curse? What does it say that people, as long as he has this mark, what's going to happen to him when he meets other people? Yes, Suzanne.
I think it's a little of both because the mark indicates that no one's supposed to harm him or touch him
Correct.
in any way. But on the other hand, it's also letting people know that he was a murderer.
Right.
So it's a little of both.
Right. Good point. So he's and what about Seth? What happens with Seth, the third child? What happens to Adam and Eve's grandchildren that come from Cain and from Seth? What is the line from these people?
Oh, you want me to get out my chart?
Okay, you get your chart. I know Ricky always comes prepared with that. But let's go. Yeah, let's go a couple of generations.
Okay, let me find Seth. Where are we? Whoops. Where was he in the chain of?
How do we get to Abraham?
Oh, we're going up. Okay. Seth, Enos, Canaan, and through Shem, Noah, Shem, down that line to Terah, to Abraham.
That's right.
You want?
Okay, so what are we talking about? I know. Are we talking about a spiritual inheritance in each one of these things or material inheritance? Or both? That's the question.
Seth, Shem.
Well, I'm going to let you think about that because it's going to come up again as we discuss, as we go further in this reading. Anyone else want to read, or we'll go back to David? Okay, we'll go back to David and then Ricky again, or whoever else wants to read.
Okay, Marty, could you remind me where we are? Are we on verse 20?
17.
17.
Okay,
17.
here we go.
We're starting with that.
And when Joseph saw that his father was laying his right hand upon the head of Ephraim, it displeased him, and he held up his father's hand to remove it from Ephraim's head unto Manasseh's head. And Joseph said unto his father, Not so, my father, for this is the firstborn. Put thy right hand upon his head. And his father Jacob refused and said, I know it, my son, I know it. He shall also become a people. He also shall become a people, and he also shall be great. Howbeit his younger brothers shall be greater than he, and his seed shall become a multitude of nations. And he blessed them that day, saying, By thee shall Israel bless, saying, God make thee as Ephraim and as Manasseh. And he set Ephraim before Manasseh. And Israel said unto Joseph.
Okay, let's stop at this point. He put Ephraim before Manasseh. Any discussion about what David just read? Yes, Suzanne.
This isn't the first time that the blessing of the birth order has been changed by God, where the younger got the firstborn blessing. And I think, yeah, I'm saying that right.
Yeah.
Okay, did you want to elaborate on that?
Well, I mean, in Jacob's case, I mean, granted, his mother orchestrated a deception, but I have to believe that God knew that was going to happen, and so Jacob, being younger than Esau, got the blessing of the firstborn, and there's someone else I'm missing. Well, I guess Isaac got the blessing of the firstborn as well, because Ishmael was Abraham's firstborn,
Okay.
but Isaac was the one that God wanted the blessing to carry through for generations.
Okay. Yes, David.
And I also wanted to take off what Don just said earlier. And according to Rabbi Herzl, it says that Jacob, against Joseph's wish, is placing the younger above the elder. This harks back to an earlier reading. And he goes on to say this is the first instance of scripture of the laying on of the hands in a blessing. So that might help what Don was trying to say earlier.
Very good. Thank you. Very good. Any other comments? So I think we're seeing certain things.
Okay, I've got my hand up.
Yes, yes, Ricky.
All righty, going back to the genealogy. On my chart here, Manasseh's name, they have as, quote, what it means is forgetting, where Ephraim's is fruitful. But I'm looking at the chart and it looked like Manasseh was a little bit more fruitful. I mean, he's got quite a few people. But Ephraim's line goes down to Samuel and it goes down to Joshua or somewhere in there. Whereas Manasseh's goes down to Gideon. And that's the only name that, Abimelech. So it's sort of a strange family tree between the two of them. You got Jephthah, you got Abimelech, you got Gideon on the one side, and the other side, you've got Samuel and Joshua that are both pretty important people. Anyway.
Okay.
Well, the others are important people also. They're just not as well known to most of us.
Okay.
They're going to come up
Their
in other
stories are more
books.
in the rest of the Bible. What's called the Nach, and in Joshua, Judges, Kings, things like that.
Right.
I was just going to suggest maybe Jacob just preferred the alphabetical order. I mean, it might be as simple as that.
Oh, golly.
I'm checking now in the concordance about the word Ephrata and Ephrat. That was a place. So I'm going to check when that appeared.
Okay. Well, while Mary is doing that research, any other comments at this point?
I want to pose a question to the group. It says, Joseph says, oh, you're making a mistake. This is how it should be. And Yaakov says, I know, it's repeated twice. This is unusual. So I don't know. I don't have an answer, but if someone can speculate or think about what's going on.
Okay. Usually in Torah, what Mary's getting after, usually in Torah, when any phrase is repeated, it's important. Sometimes it's repeated twice. Sometimes it's reported 3 times. Yes, Wendy.
Over there.
Oh, okay. She didn't have to.
Yeah, are we on?
We're on.
Yes.
Yeah, if I turn on my sound, we get the echo effect.
Oh, okay.
It going along with what the rabbi said, did Jacob know he was, blessing the wrong one because he was his favorite? Not because it was alphabetical, just because he was his favorite.
Okay.
And he's entitled to that on his deathbed. He certainly is.
Sure. Good point. Good point. Both of you, good point. Yes, Joanne.
I'm just going to add to that last thought. You know, some grandchildren come to see you more often. Or I have one particular nephew who sat with me for 5 hours one day, and all we had was like water, because he kept asking questions about my mom and dad, etc. And if that occurred with these two children, they would, the one that asked the questions, the one that wanted the history, would become the favorite. No matter what you did, it would be the favorite. You know.
I think Joanne is correct. I agree with her completely.
Yes, Don.
About the repetition reminds me of the old joke about the diner and restaurant who ordered mahi mahi, and the server said, "I heard you the first time."
That's good. That's good. Okay, take a break for laughter.
Mahi in Hebrew means what is it? So,
triple joke here.
uh-huh.
A couple of things. And I don't know if the same holds true in Hebrew. We discussed this when we used the verb to see. Can we also do that when we use the verb to know? Such as, I know what you're saying, but I know what I have to do.
Or I see what you're saying and I see what I have to do.
That's right. That's right. And so I don't know, does that hold up in Hebrew also? Or are they different words altogether?
It's an interesting question. And of course, there's a big difference between the biblical and the contemporary,
right?
Use of the phrases. To know something in the biblical sense, with my understanding, to know something in the biblical sense doesn't imply factual. It does imply intimacy. It implies a connection to the event or to the person. But it's not like empirical knowledge. That's a different, at least biblically, that's a different context.
Okay. Yes, Don, you have your hand up. Miri is really trying to figure this out here. Go ahead. Okay, let's hear what Miri had to say, and then Don.
The way Efrat, or Bederech Efrat, on the way Ephrata, is Beit Lechem. Beit Lechem. Beit Lechem, which is a place that we know and we met before. Belen, how do you say Beit Lechem in English?
Bethlehem.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Efrat. So now, and I'm not going to go there, but we can go to a communication to start finding if there is a connection between that and the name of Ephraim. Ich weiß nicht.
I don't know.
Probably, I think Efrat, as if I remember what the guides in Israel tell you, is that the name Efrat of the place, it comes from Perot, comes from the fruits that were there on some of the trees, as opposed to Ephraim, when we're given the name, there's an explanation. I don't remember it offhand, but it probably is more from the be fruitful and multiply kind of understanding, human fruitfulness rather than natural, I think.
Okay,
Okay.
very
I have a
nice.
niece, effect.
Don,
Yeah, this is really interesting to me, the difference between I see what you are saying versus I know what you're saying, because most relationships get into trouble when somebody says, I know what you're thinking. And so then that has to be, and it's usually wrong, and it usually ends up in trouble. But when clarification is required on somebody's words or actions so that are visible, I guess looking for a little more on that, and I don't understand the Hebrew that expresses that. It seems to me a really crucial.
yeah, that's why I sort of hedged on things. If are there different meanings? If I were to say, I know this, and I know what I have to do, is it the same word in Hebrew, or is it are there two separate words for that?
It's probably the same. It's certainly the same word in modern Hebrew. In biblical, there's the, like I was talking about before, there's the verb to know, but and then there's also one that we kind of translate as understand or understanding or discernment. Hamevin Yavin, kind of thing, of someone who really understands to the core of what it is that you're talking about. And then there's also the other one, which I think is going to show up in this, if I remember correctly. And then there's also belief, belief in the sense of agreement. So that may not be, I know what you're saying, that may lean more into, I agree with what you're saying. But those are all the verbs that come to mind right off the bat.
Okay. All right.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I sort of half heard, but sometimes I use the expression to know it or to own it. When you really know it in your cells, in your gut.
Mm-hmm.
Owning something is really knowing it.
Right. So maybe it's duplicated here, so we can have a discussion like this. I don't know. Anyway, any other comments about this? Well, let's. So now Ephraim is going to put before Manasseh, and so if somebody would like to pick up with verse 21, go ahead, David.
Okay. And Israel said unto Joseph, Behold, I die, but God will be with you and bring you back unto the land of your fathers. Moreover, I have given to thee one portion above thy brethren, which I took out of the land of the Amorite with my sword and with my bow.
Okay, let's stop at that point.
And we're at the end of the chapter.
Okay, yes. Let's stop for a second and think about what Jacob is saying, or Israel is saying to Joseph. This is, he's sort of paraphrasing the idea that but God will be with you and bring you back to the land of your fathers. Okay. Any comments about that? Okay.
Well, I think that he puts a very specific place. He talks about Shem. So, and that again is, who asked about the 400 years, Don. Eventually when they get to the promised land, as if they had already the map of who, where. And we see it here. So the issue of prophecy or knowledge is already at this point. He knows that Ephraim or Menashe are going to be in that area. Actually, they're going to have two areas, but never mind.
Two separate
so
areas,
it
yes.
Yeah, it's even knowledge. It's not prophesizing and say, well, I'm not sure, perhaps he's going to be there. No, he said it's going to be there. And
That's
that
right.
belongs to this and this. And I promise you.
Yes.
And not only
Rabbi
that,
Zalman.
but Shechem, then there's a play on words, but Shechem is where Joseph is buried.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, Shechem is Nablus, but that's where Joseph will be buried. So he's even connecting his inheritance, legacy, portion, whatever, to the Ephraim and Manasseh territory.
Okay. That was burned into my brain. Anyway, what I was going to say, that's very important also, that he's seeing into the future. But now let's take up verse 22. Okay. And now I give you one portion more than to your brothers, which I wrested from the Amorites with my sword and bow. Does that raise any questions? That phrase, that I wrested from the Amorites with my sword and bow. This dovetails into the discussion that the rabbis had about Shechem. Okay. Yes, Joanne.
Okay. This is verse 22. And down at the bottom of my Bible here, Jewish Bible, it says that Shechem means uncertain, but others say it's a mountain slope.
Mhm.
And it's very hard to understand this within this sentence. How can it be a mountain slope? Are they buried in the cave, but it's on a mountain?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay,
Could
thank
be,
you.
yeah, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Well, did Jacob get involved when this is a reference to the Dinah story
Right.
also?
Exactly, yes.
Who does what, or in that story, and what does Jacob do in that story? How is Dinah avenged?
Well,
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joanne.
Everyone
It's
is,
pretty awful.
yeah, it's, I guess it's an awful story, but I believe everyone is killed.
Yeah.
The
And,
Shechemites, yeah,
yeah, and.
if you will.
Yeah, and and they just take the women and children. So, but I guess
What does
remember because
Jacob
I don't
do
like
in
that
that
story.
But what does Jacob do in that story?
Good question.
He doesn't
doesn't like what
participate.
they do.
He's sitting and thinking about what's going on. So did Jacob use his sword and bow?
Mm-mm.
Yes, David.
Yeah, I'm thinking here that Rabbi Hertz's commentary is that it's odd that suddenly the sword and the bow and the military equipment are mentioned, because he specifically says that Jacob's military exploit is not elsewhere mentioned. So it is a strange thing you bring up. And I think, Marty, you now get to be rabbi status for that.
Well, it becomes, it struck me a little bit when it talks about that when we're discussing this, in no other place has Jacob, this is in Plout, in no other place has Jacob been portrayed as a military person. This notation is therefore either a remnant of another tradition, or sword and bow may be an idiom for through my labor, as a reference to Jacob's purchase of property at Shechem with hard-earned money. Okay, this has been discussed. There's a midrash that says that prayer was Jacob's bow and sword. Another view is that bow and sword were mitzvot and good deeds. Okay.
I agree with that. I think that's a good interpretation, Marty.
There is a good commentary, and then I'm going to address Suzanne. For those of you are interested, there is a commentary that specifically addresses this. It's from the Torah.com. And I will tell you, it's a Chabad site, but this covers a lot of different interpretations, what you heard mentioned, okay, by Rabbi Plout. And he goes, it's a lengthy discussion. It's by Dr. Rabbi Zev Farber. And it is just, I'm not going to go into all the details on it, but for those of you who are interested, it is available online. So, and it has even more references than what I saw in Plout. So I'm going to, without taking up a lot of time with this, at least some people in many branches of Judaism, many different interpretations, many different midrash. There's a lot about this online that you can get a hold of if you're interested. Any other comments? Suzanne, you had your hand up. Yes.
I just wanted to add that there is no other reference in the Bible, both Old and New Testament, about
For what? For what, Susan? There is
that's
no
what
reference for.
well, that's what I'm getting to. I didn't say it yet.
No, but what did you say? That there is no reference?
That's all I said so far. I'm getting to what the no reference is about Jacob participating in any battles or wars or anything like that. There is a reference in the book of, I think it's John, that harkens back to the Amorites, where Jacob did build a well, and that's about the only thing that could possibly tie in with this verse, that that Jacob did participate in some kind of a battle. So that's all I wanted to say.
I'm most familiar with the commentaries that kind of follow Plaut, that sword and bow was an idiomatic expression. It didn't mean explicitly so the military armament, but I guess the phrase, and you can even make a connection into the Hebrew of my toil and trouble.
Right.
Okay? You know, everything that I had to endure, and that the Amorites is a generic term for all of the enemies and all the other peoples whom I have encountered.
Yeah, I mean, that could be.
Right.
Right. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
I'm looking at Stone, and Stone has, that's my Bible, this is my Torah, and he quotes Rashi many times, and here there is a quotation of Gur Aryeh, another, that both ways are similes, they are metaphorical. One is sharp brain, etc. But what I want to emphasize, because many people ask, even in the group, why we had so much killing and conquering and fighting and so forth. So rabbis also had that problem. It's not very modern just to say you don't do that, but the explanation here is to be a simile, a metaphorical way of the sword is a sharp mind and so forth. I find it very interesting that we are not that smart today. They were smart in the past as well. The other thing that I might think about is that Yaakov, being so smart and prophesizing and seeing the future, he knows that the Canaan land, the promised land, is not going to be given on a silver plate, that fights are going to happen and wars are going to happen and conquering are going to happen. My mind.
Good point. Good point. Yes, Don.
You know, I was wondering too whether the emphasis here couldn't be on the Amorites, because as Rabbi Mary says that battles were continual when tribes were taking land one from the other. Whether this was just a statement to say that this land, you know, Israel has taken from the Amorites, who were a pretty fierce tribe at the time, just to drive a stake in the ground and say this is ours, and now I'm going to hand it to you to continue that ownership.
Yeah, and we read in the Haggadah of Pesach, from generation to generation, Midor Vador, they want to destroy us, but God is going to redeem us. So there is that prophecy. I mean, who knows that? But I think that we as a tribe have felt that in generation to generation and continuing to be continued, unfortunately.
When here's a general comment about prophecy, whether it's in the Haftarah and you have all of the prophets, or individuals that become a prophet. Is everything spelled out in detail? Or are there phrases that are mentioned that are left to our personal interpretation of what is being said, or generational interpretation, or community interpretation? Remember, we know in most of the prophets, we are privileged to know what happened afterwards. But at the time of the prophecy, how is it very explicit, or can it be interpreted in different ways? The Greeks and the Romans have many books and plays and poems written about that misinterpretation of what was truly meant for by the prophecy in that story. Okay. Yes. First, Rabbi Miri, then Don.
Who wanted someone else, please?
Okay, Don, you raised your hand.
I got to restrain myself here because this is a big topic for me. And the problem with prophecy, it's always about the future, as I say. But it also is the biggest conflict between religion and science. Is one says, they both say what's going to happen next, but they have different reasons. And also, prophecy leads to ideology. And ideology can't stand to have truth around with it. So there's a history of prophecy forcing an interpretation of what happens as being the truth when it's not. So I got to hold myself back here because I can go off on a tangent. But certainly in modern times, prophecy is at the root of the most horrible war and prejudice and antagonism. And even in modern times, I know in fundamentalist Christians, the Russians are going to attack Israel, and that's going to trigger the millennial destruction, the apocalypse. Anyway, it seems to me prophecy is always at the root of the biggest troubles the world has ever known. And so I'm going to mute myself here.
Okay. Suzanne, you had your hand up, and then we'll get back to Rabbi Miri.
I'm a big fan of prophecy, and prophecy is actually what brought me back to God and to studying the Bible. About a third of the Bible is filled with prophecies, most of which have been fulfilled, but there is still more yet to come. And I find biblical prophecy to be very precise. We may not always understand the meaning at the time, but after the prophecy has been fulfilled, then the meaning then becomes very, very clear. And as far as Russia's concerned, I think, Don, you're referring to Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, Gog and Magog. And it talks about the kingdoms of the north, which would include Russia, at least as we know it today.
The Scythians, as they
right, but I'm just saying it in as we know today. But that is part of the end times, but it's not going to bring on the apocalypse. There will be other things that'll bring that on. So, but anyways, the somewhere in the Bible it commands us to learn prophecy, and I forget which chapter and verse that is, but I'm very much in favor of studying it, and I don't think we study it enough.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, Rabbi Miri, the floor is yours.
Well, I'm not going to talk about prophecy because I feel that that's so complicated. But Suzanne, I don't see, I mean, prophecy as the end of it, but seeing what's going to happen if you don't do and do. For example, Al Gore, in my mind, is a prophet. Maybe that's why he got the Nobel Prize. Because he's telling us that if you don't do this and this and this is what's going to happen. And we see that that's happening. And many, many people, just like in the Torah or the Tanakh, say all these prophets are Michigane and they don't know what they're talking about. But regarding interpretations, Dawn, I want to point out two things. First of all, each one of us has a different translation of Torah. And at that moment, behind it, there is, as you say, an ideology. I have the observant one. I have Stone, which is the very, 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 very traditional. So they use words, and words are tricky. And the other one that I would suggest is look at our Constitution and look how each one of the judges interprets what's written. And some of them are doing what people do with the Torah. That's what it says, you know, stone your son if he does whatever. No, it doesn't say that. But just word by word, this is the interpretations. And others say, no, we have to update it for today because it's a living document, etc. I think that our Constitution is a very good example of interpretation by several people. Amen, Archa.
I agree.
It's a good point. Yes, Rabbi Norman.
Yeah, I guess I would have to just jump in with the following. Mainstream Jewish thinking doesn't mean that there aren't the exceptions, you know, and splinter groups and whatever, but mainstream Jewish thinking makes a strong distinction between prophecy and I guess we would call vision. Okay. Prophecy is bringing the word of God. I mean, that's literally what a prophet does. And the prophet doesn't necessarily speak to us. The professional prophet was speaking to the aristocracy, speaking to the leadership. And then with the idea and the hope that the message from God would filter down to Amcha, to the people. Okay, whereas those who were chosen by God to receive a specific message, more in the lines of what I think Suzanne was talking about, or what most of us would be fortune telling kind of thing. You know, what's going to happen in the future. That's vision. Those are dreams and aha moments and inspirations that come to individuals who have really refined their minds or their hearts or their souls to understand the human condition, as well as to understand what's happening in the heavens, if you will. So there's a specific distinction in Jewish tradition between prophecy, which is a direct message from God about behavior, ethics, morality, things like that, as opposed to having a vision of what is going to happen in the future. and again, endorsing what Rabbi Miri is talking about, is from all the different interpretations that are based on our own personal experiences or on our own ideologies.
Very, very good points by everyone. Any other discussion? No, those are very important. I just wanted to read something that was also in Rabbi Plaut's commentary about the end of days. First of all, end of days could be when somebody just closes his eyes. It could be and dies. It does it for that person. That's one way of looking at it, as opposed to end of days in prophecy and like that. But this is a commentary by Simcha
Bunum?
Bunum. Is it Bunum? Bunum?
No, Bunum. But it's Yiddish.
Bunum.
It's it's not his last name.
Okay.
Right.
The commentary reads, why should Jacob have wanted to reveal the date of the end of days to his sons? And his answer, it's a rhetorical question because he answers it, because exile is easier to bear if one knows in advance when it will end. But God wanted Israel's exile to be difficult, and therefore he closed Jacob's vision from him so that the children of Israel should not learn the date of their final redemption. Any comments? Or we can just leave it. Yes, Wendy.
As soon as you said that, they didn't know when it was going to end. We know it took forever, and even if they knew it would take forever to get redemption, they could still wait for it. So this is God's way of saying, you're going to work for it. Yeah.
Yeah, good point. Yes, Suzanne.
You're muted.
Suzanne, you're muted.
Sorry. When the Israelite, when Nebuchadnezzar captured Jerusalem and tore down the temple and all, and they were taken to Babylon, there was a prophecy there that it would be for 70 years. And that came to be. And I'm trying to think if there was another time where there was an end in sight. But I can also say for the final Great Tribulation, that's supposed to last for 7 years, and then it'll be all over. So my point here is that God does provide an end time, or when the Israelites were wandering around in the wilderness, God told them 40 years. So there always is an end point, maybe not the exact date, like April 23rd or, maybe not like that, but certainly in terms of a year, there's always an end point. It's not open-ended.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Don.
If you actually check, it was only 40 years before the Persians let the Hebrews back into Babylon, start rebuilding the temple. Everybody thinks that prophecy was fulfilled to the year, but it wasn't.
All right, well,
Okay.
I've been taught 70, so I've been going with that.
Okay. It's only 30 years, a generation. It's okay, but either way. Any other comments? Yes, Rabbi.
Yeah, and I just need to say, with total respect for Suzanne and her method of Bible study, is that scholarship, if you will, would remind us that everything that we are now quoting was handed down orally for generations, if not hundreds of years before it was written down. So whether it's 40 or 70, it's not a historical fact. It's based on traditions that had been handed down. Then finally, someone wrote it down. I mean, even in New Testament, it's not what was actually written down at the moment. It's based on what people had said, the Baba Mises, or indeed the stories that were handed down.
Okay, good points. Yes, Don.
Not to contradict you, Rabbi, but in recent archaeology has really made some amazing discoveries outside of biblical writings. Like, the Persians left documented history about when what Horus did and when these things happened, and they're gradually being documented fully. I'm really obsessed with this now, because the confirmation of biblical narrative with historical discoveries and onto inscriptions and
Sure.
later on papyrus. Anyway,
Sure. I'm not
Okay.
saying that there's not corroboration, but I'm saying that the texts as we have them in our Western tradition, let's call it that way, the texts are not necessarily the same as reading it in a newspaper.
sure.
Right.
Or a
Good
or
point.
even a documented history book.
Very good. Any other yes, Joanne.
I'm not trying to jump into the foil here or something, but when I visited, I knew what it was a few seconds ago, and it's Jericho. When I visited Jericho at that particular time, they were digging down to see what had happened over the centuries, okay? And we have in the Bible where they marched round and round Jericho and the walls came tumbling down. And they know approximately, like whether, what years those might be. They have discovered that 5,000 years ago or thereabouts, the walls actually were made of inferior material. So if they marched round and around, they would have fallen. And I think when I'm reading the Bible, that may say in the Bible that it was maybe 4,000 years ago, but I also know that it is a fact. Like if I tell my children that my grandmother or great-grandmother was Indian, it's a fact. We just have to accept that and go on from there. And especially, I think, on the prophecies. I mean, prophecies are good, but there's truth in there.
Very good. Thank you. Yes, Rabbi Mary.
I'm not going to contradict you, Joanne. One thing that and it's not a belief, this is not a theology, but the Torah, we have 5 books. The Torah, when the Torah ends, we start doing something different. What's written is different. Now it becomes a lot of history. Now we can see digging. But during these 40 years, I think that scientists dug and dug and dug and dug they couldn't find anything, including the Sinai Mountain. But you're right in that point of Jericho, absolutely, because Jericho comes after Torah, when
Mhm.
Joshua starts
All right.
talking. So if you go to the book of Joshua, you're going to find that.
Okay. Okay. Interesting. Interesting.
Now, I know we talk about the prophet in the Jewish sense. It has been explained to us as the difference between a prophecy and a vision. There's a difference with dreams. We've discussed all of these things. Now that we have to raise some questions, and I thought I would do it at this point and then break into the specific sons and everything. When we are warned against false prophets. What is the definite? How are we to recognize a prophet before the prophecy comes true?
By the life of that person.
No.
Okay, well, he's talking, or he or she is talking about the future. Yes.
Okay.
Ricky, please.
Many people define the word prophecy as this they are a fortune teller, a future teller. But the way I understood it is the prophet is somebody who sees what is happening now and then can project what will happen if you continue doing whatever it is you're doing. So the true prophet would be truly expressing what is happening now. And a false prophet would be making up stories. I mean, that,
Okay.
there's two parts to the prophecy. It's not just, okay, I close my eyes and I say, the house across the street's going to be green tomorrow. But if I see a paint truck come by with a
Your image just froze.
tomorrow, the house may be green. So there's two parts to that prophecy.
Okay.
If you understand what I'm saying there. Yeah.
But there's
A false prophet would say the green truck means it's blue, or something, just something made up.
Okay. What is the Jewish definition of a prophet? The rabbi has mentioned that. Speaks the word of God. So when we meet somebody on the street, how do we know?
Exactly.
Is there a way to identify and say, oh, this is a true prophet and this is a false prophet? Is there a way to know the difference?
Don has his hand up.
I know. Don, please.
I'm not sure I can give you a good answer for that, but I think one component is motivation. And the Hebrew prophets, the motivation have not been of self-interest. They've have a moral basis and a interest in the community rather than self. So if you say, somebody says, vote for me, and you're not a prophet, that's a false prophet. But I don't, other than that, I don't know how I would answer that.
Okay. David, you're muted.
I'm a muted man. Okay. I just wanted to point out from Jeremiah, and the reason I know it's from Jeremiah is that there was a episode of Lou Grant where they really go into this. And then in that episode and in Jeremiah, they say that I have not sent them, these prophets, and Jerusalem, Jerusalem, return unto the Lord thy God. And I just wanted to point that out. But you made a very important point there, Marty.
Okay.
Can
Yes.
I-
Okay. Everyone's
Oh.
hand is going up now. Can I, if it's okay with the rabbis, can I acknowledge Wendy first to get the other side
Sure.
of this story?
Sure.
Here comes Wendy.
And then we'll go back to the rabbis.
You know, I'm going to talk about modern times right now. Because to me, for example, the people seem to follow the person who says exactly what they want to hear. And in the present, you're thinking, wow, this person is great. I'm going to follow this person right over the cliff. And then they realize either they told you the truth or they didn't. And then I told David that what's going on right now with, I'm going to call it our politics. And then we went back to the movie The 10 Commandments, and when Moses came down off of Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments, and he looked at everybody in revelry and said, those who follow the Lord come here, those who don't, and then he throws it down, and everybody who was following the false prophet died. So basically it's you have to trust who you're listening to. And if I don't trust a person, I'm not going to listen to them. And some people think, well, I don't care if I trust them or not. This is what I want to hear. So it all depends.
Good point. Okay. Rabbi Norman, then Rabbi Mary.
Okay, first the facetious one, and then the second one. The facetious one, thanks to David's reference to Lou Grant, Ed Asner, at least in the 1980s, Ed Asner he was a member of Stephen Wise Synagogue in Los Angeles, and he would read the Haftarah frequently. So when he quoted that Jeremiah portion that you're talking about, he had probably already read that in synagogue also. Okay. I heard him do it, not that phrase.
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay. But the other thing is I wanted to affirm and confirm what Don was saying about the message of the prophet. How do you know who's a real prophet? Motivation is one, and authenticity, not of the person, but of the message. If the message falls into the framework of what we understand God's message to be, okay, then that's another mark of the whether it's a true prophet or not.
Very good. Yes, thank you. Okay, Rabbi Mary, and then I want to recognize Michael.
Why don't you recognize Michael first?
Okay,
Go ahead,
Michael, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I would ask, are there any, in my opinion, if you ask, are there any prophets, a real prophet today? And I would say no. There are no prophets today as they were thousands of years ago, because I don't see any indication of, and I hope I'm not going too far afield, but I don't, and I think that would be an indication of, based on what a prophet would be, because I don't see that type of activity, if you will, from anyone, any Jewish, talking about Jewish prophets. I just don't see it. If anybody disagrees with that, I would like to hear it.
Okay, Rabbi
Miri.
Well, I don't know if these people are Jewish or not. Some are not. But let's say Fauci. He's prophesying that if we don't wear the masks and don't keep space, we're going to be in trouble. So he is like Ricky said, he looks at the situation and we cannot use the word prophesize, but he sees the future, which is a prophesizing. So these days, Michael, we need to look at situations that we have that we could change but we don't. And these people, I mentioned Al Gore, that's a very good, I mean, if we continue polluting the air, eventually we won't have oxygen to breathe. So a prophet can talk about that. The last thing, David, that I want to say, Jeremiah is my favorite prophet, not Isaiah, but Jeremiah. And Jeremiah at one point says, I'm tired of prophesizing. It's like fire within me. I'm told to prophesy. So I think that someone was talking about motivation. It's like the word of God is in me and I cannot stop. I cannot stop. And those are the people that persist believing that this is the truth. In Jeremiah, you can quote so much beautiful stuff, and I believe he was a prophet.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Okay, Rabbi Norman had his hand up, and then Ricky.
Yeah, I want to kind of respond and amplify what Michael is saying from the standpoint of Jewish tradition. I mean, the Torah itself says, "Lo kam b'Yisrael kamo shehu." Never again in Israel did there arise another prophet like Moses. So Jewish tradition is very, very hesitant to use that title of prophet. There are individuals who have claimed it, but not necessarily from historical Jewish tradition. I think if you ask a lot of people in mainstream Judaism these days, they might use a name like Abraham Joshua Heschel as being a prophet, Rabbi Leo Beck as being claiming a prophet, but that probably with a small p rather than a capital P. If you will, there are certainly some who would say that Menachem Schneerson, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, could have been seen as a prophet. But what Judaism says, again, going back to that quote, is in Israel, meaning for the Jewish people, there really hasn't been another prophet like Moses or like the Jeremiahs and the Ezekiels and the Micahs. I have to throw in Micah for Ricky's sake. And like that. But that doesn't mean that other peoples, other religions, other groups haven't had their prophets. We only speak for Israel. We only speak for ourselves.
Very good.
Yeah, and it says, since the temple was destroyed, the prophecy was given to children and to Nashotim, naive people, and I don't remember the third word.
When Mary was talking about Jeremiah saying, I'm tired, I had a flash into my Greek mythology and was thinking of Cassandra, that she could speak the truth, but nobody would believe her. So that's another sort of side to the whole prophecy picture of who believes the prophet or disbelieves the prophet or disbelieves the prophecy. I'll put it that way. So I'm just throwing in Cassandra into the mix.
Okay, very good.
Nicely done.
And yes, Joanne.
I'm going to add two names to. I do not know if they're Jewish or not, but what I do know is I feel.
Joanne, could you sit closer to the microphone, please?
Okay,
Thank you.
now you can really see me. I need to turn my face off, I think, here. I guess I'm thinking also that maybe there are prophets out there that we also should be listening for. And I don't know if these two women are I think of them as prophets today. And the first is Greta Thunberg. And she's the one, Greta Thunberg. And,
Yeah.
and she's the young girl saying, do something about our world. And the other one is Melania.
Melania.
Huh?
Yeah.
Malala? Okay.
Malala.
Anyway,
Below.
she's the one that's saying, educate people, help, and especially the women, and especially of her country. Those are the people that when I hear of a prophet, that's what I think of in the Bible also. Those people to me speak to me about what's going on now, but look into the future.
Thank you,
Except they
Joanne.
don't claim to be speaking for God.
No.
Right.
They are not.
Okay, right.
Which is,
Thank you.
so that's a general, I wanted, what the criteria are for in Judaism. But
Okay.
yes, they are looking to another way that we could improve upon things for everyone. Yes. Don. Don, excuse me one second. Michael has had his hand up, and then I'll come back to you, Don.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to respond very carefully to Rabbi Miri and say that sometimes prophecy or prediction, prophecy would be in the religious sense of predictions about certain things, can be also used as a scare tactic, because there are times that current times, there is no absolute proof, but supposition, but no absolute proof that anything is going to really happen because of certain things. And so we have to be very, very careful. I wish I could talk more openly about this, but it won't be good because I wouldn't get into certain things. But so I'll just leave it at that.
I appreciate that, Michael. Thank you.
I know you do, and I don't want to start a thing over here because I'll just say that it's supposition. There is no actual proof on anything that is going on today. No, but supposition.
Okay. Thank you. So anyway, Don, you're going to have the last word, and then because I just
can we
noticed the
hear,
time.
Marty, can we hear Bev? She had her hand up and she never spoke.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize. I didn't realize. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Mary.
Sorry, Dawn.
I just wanted to mention that Malala did not make predictions.
No.
At all.
Right,
That
right.
was in response to Joanna's.
Good point.
That
Good
was-
point.
I didn't understand.
But thank you.
You're welcome, but that's a good point, Bev.
Joanne is saying she didn't hear Bev totally, or didn't understand.
Oh,
Good
I'm
point.
sorry. I just mentioned that Malala could not be a prophet because she did not make predictions. She was she is a wonderful, absolute wonderful person. I would put her, if I had such things in my religion, which I don't, I'd put her in the sainthood.
Okay.
But anyway, no, I mean, she's
we didn't talk about
wonderful as far as education of women. Her example is the most perfectly wonderful, but she couldn't be a prophet because she didn't make any predictions. She didn't, actually prophesy.
Okay. Thank you. Hold it, Ricky. Just a second. Don has had his hand up for a while now.
Just real quick, I think I'm glad we're staying inside Judaism, because if we step outside, then we have to talk about Muhammad and Joseph.
Exactly. There's so many, and that's what the Rabbi Norman was getting after. That every community, every people, they have their own concepts of prophets and prophecy, and they have their own belief systems. But that's why I want to center it more around Judaism, because Judaism, it has its own criteria. And yes, Ricky.
Oh, no, I was just saying that, I was going to ask Bev about how she felt about Greta. Does Greta make a prophecy? But we're getting back. I'm taking it back. Rewind.
Yes, Greta.
Never mind, we're getting out of the Judaism, so I said rewind.
Okay.
I rewound.
On that note, Ruth Ann, do you have any announcements?
Just we have service on Friday night, 7 o'clock, and Torah study will continue every Saturday until the second Saturday in October.
Okay.
No breaks. We have
No
Tuesday
breaks.
months.
Yes, Michael.
And
Yeah.
also, and I want to thank Michael for reminding me that I forgot to send out the link. And by all means, if you don't get a link from me by Thursday, somebody reach out to me, because it means I lost track of time.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Michael.
Okay, I have three quick things. I just thought we did have a Jewish prophet very recently, and by the name of Bernie Madoff. But let's leave it at that. Yeah, leave that alone. Okay, I want to ask: did we finish? Did we actually finish the study and the talk on the Ten Commandments?
No.
No, we're rescheduling. I don't remember offhand. Maybe Ruth Ann, maybe you do.
9th of August, I think.
End of August, I think. Maybe the 30th of August.
Okay.
No, I have your. Oh, why is it not coming up?
August 30th.
August 30th.
August 30th.
Oh, okay. Okay, just one other thing I want to ask. Is it possible to have a future discussion on the Holocaust?
Sure.
There are several good time, very timely events that come up, and we can do that at that time, even.
Well, yeah, whenever. I just wanted to know if we could, if that's a possibility.
Yeah.
Because I would like.
We have in the past.
I wasn't sure if we did, but I just would like to personally. I would like to see.
Yeah, there are any number of ways that we can approach a study session or a series on, implications of history, background of whatever. We'll talk about it. Sure.
Okay. David, and then David, you speak, and then I have to go because I have company here.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Marty. I just wanted to pick up just finally on what Marty said about the Jewish concept of prophecy, which is good, and I agree with it, with the exception that we as Jews live in the world. And I don't think you can just have a Jewish concept. I think we do have to look at all these other prophets as well. We might be able to interpret them from a Jewish perspective, but I think they count.
Good point. Very good point. Very good point. That's why we try to bring things in from other points of view. Okay, well, I have to excuse myself and have a great week, and see you next Saturday.
Bye, everybody.
Shalom.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Shabbat shalom to everyone.
Good
Shabbat
job.
shalom.
Good Shabbos, thank you.